Hello, welcome back to episode 13 of the Surface Explore Record video series, where I'm stepping you through a three-part process, a methodology of coding with AI. This is the methodology that I use. I'm a 4-decade veteran of software engineering, software development, IT, and this is a methodology that I've come up with to make sure that the AI isn't making too many silent decisions. Silent decisions are what kills your project. Because later, when you're trying to deploy or trying to maintain or trying to extend with new features, these silent decisions can come back and haunt you. They may have been good decisions at the beginning, but they were not great decisions for your application. So Surface Explore Record means that we are going to use AI to surface decisions, then we're going to explore options, then we're going to record our decision to give to the AI so that it can follow that as a guide. Now remember, AI doesn't follow instructions, but it can use it as a guide while it's building, but also we can use it to review what the AI has done. In episode 13, we're going to stay in the build phase. In the last episode, we finished phase G1 of my TaskFlow project. Remember, TaskFlow is a task management application that I'm building. We finished phase G1, and at the same time, we created a readiness test plan. We'll go over that a little bit. And I also created a plan to run the application locally so that I can do this test. So let's go over to VS Code and running Claude code in a terminal in VS Code. And I'll show you how I would finish the testing for phase G1, and then we'll continue into G2 and the rest of phase G. I'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay, welcome back. As you can see, I have Claude code running in a terminal in VS Code. I have done nothing more than start Claude, but I am going to use my pickup command. Remember a couple of episodes earlier, I created this pickup command that tells Claude to read my implementation plan and implementation status, and also to look at the latest GitHub to understand where we are and to make recommendations. Now, I already know what I want to do next, but I still want to always start with pickup so that it has the information that it needs. Notice that it says that we finished all the way through G1 right here. And there's a few things that have been deferred. It tells me what's next is phase G2. That's the dashboard. Let's go back, though, briefly, and let's just look at our implementation status document so that we can remember where we are. So let me scroll up to the top. This gives me right away, I'll put it in the preview mode so you can see it better. And we can see right away that Part A all the way through Part F have been complete, 4 through 4, and we have finished one part of Part G. That's just G1 that I finished last time. Now, if you remember, let's scroll down to see what G was, because G1 was very important. In phase F, we completed all the front-end framework, the skeleton, if you will, and in G, we actually start creating the screens, the pages, what it's going to look like. And in G1, it's the auth screens and just the basic UI. So what I also did last week is I got Claude to create a readiness plan, a readiness test for G1. And here's that readiness test. Notice at the top it says this is through phase G1, and it tells what it covers and how to start it. And then it gives me, right here, it tells me how to check it. And the reason that I like these readiness plans is that I can right away see what to test. So see, this tells me log in and observe the layout, and this is what's expected, and then I can mark it's correct. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to tell Claude to start the app locally. In the previous episode, I had Claude create a document that tells it how to run it. So what it's going to do is it's going to start the back end of the databases, the API back end. Everything is going to start in Docker. And then in the front end, it's going to run that in a local dev server for running React. So let's give that just a minute to come up. I'll close some of this out. I'll keep my readiness testing up, because when this runs, then I'm going to switch over to a browser, and I'll show you TaskFlow running in the browser, and we'll go through some of these tests just to show you how I would do it if I was doing this as a as a real production app. Now, sometimes people say, should I do this readiness test at each phase? Like, should I do phase G1 and then G2 and then G3? That's really up to you. I mean, you can do the entire application. You can completely develop it before you do any readiness testing. But here's the thing. The more that you build before you test, then the harder it's going to be to debug. If I debug at this point, so if I run these tests at G1 and I find any issues, it's much easier to debug because I know exactly what I'm looking for. But if I go all the way through the app, everything is built, everything is running, and then I run my readiness test, it's very likely that it becomes much harder to debug. It's harder to tell exactly what or where the error is. So I'm going to begin debugging right away. Now notice that I had my startup app tell me where to go. So here it tells me that my local IP is going to be localhost 5173, port 5173. That's where React is running, and it's already seeded with data, so it's ready for me to test. So I'm going to go into the browser, and I'll come back in just a minute, and we'll do a couple of tests. Okay, I'm back. As you can see, I now have TaskFlow running in the browser. I've logged in, so that part worked. I can now start going through my test plan. And what was my test plan? Well, the first was just to make sure the shell renders. So it does. It's there. I was able to log in, so I can check that off. Next, it says the sidebar nav. Make sure that the sidebar nav is there. Well, we see that here's the navigation, and we can see that it works. So we see, we're just stepping through. The next one, 5.3, is the header. Look at the header. Make sure everything is there. Here's my header. It's all there. The next part of the phase is to check the active nav state. I can click the dashboards, click on everything, make sure it works. Again, I've done that. I click on something, we can see that the header changes. We can see that the screen changes. Obviously, these haven't been built yet, but we can see that it's all there. The next part says the breadcrumbs update. Breadcrumbs are here, and as you can see that these are following along. I'll go dashboard. The breadcrumb says dashboard. I go notifications. It says notifications. Notice if I go to API migration, it says that I'm in project and board, and that is correct. So my breadcrumbs are working. Last one I'll do is to make sure that the bare project URL directs correctly. These are the kind of things that you really want to make sure works at the beginning. And what that means is that I should be able to just put in the URL and this project ID, and it should take me directly to this board. This is important because you may want to send a link to somebody and say, hey, check out this board, and you don't want to have to send them all the information. So if I just come in here and put in projects, and I put in just the ID, then it should route me to the board, and it does. So that's all I'm doing. I am just going through and doing a sanity check, make sure that everything works like it's supposed to. This is not something that the AI can check for you. If you're relying only on the automated tests that are run like linting test or some of the unit test, integration test, the end-to-end test, those are all great and you need those, but you also need readiness tests. You need tests for you to look at and just do a sanity check to make sure everything's working. Now I'm going to return back to VS Code and Claude Code, and we'll pick up this episode. Okay, so I am back in Claude Code running in a terminal in VS Code. I have stopped my application from running. I'm going to send this in the background, and then I'll run Claude in agent view so that I can run multiple sessions. I now have multiple sessions. I'm going to go into this one and just rename it, and let's just call this one phase G2, because here I'm going to run phase G2. And now remember, I started this with pickup, which means that it already has all the information from the implementation plan. So all I have to do now that I'm ready to continue is just say enter plan mode and implement phase G2. So I'm going to tell Claude to kick off here. It's going to go back and check the implementation plan. It's going to go through and start building based on the implementation plan. And really, at this point, it's just step by step. You do this same part each time. Now, let's go back. Let's go back and start a new session, and I'll just start a new session with my pickup command, and we should see that session running. And I'm just going to rename this one to G2 readiness test. All right, so here that's getting ready, and it looks like my phase G2 needs some input. So I'm just going to step through this while they're both running. Now, what I want to do in this other session, while G2 is building, wait for that to finish. What I want to do here is I want to get it to start working on the readiness test for G2. Remember, the readiness test that we just finished was only for phase G1. So now we want to add to that a readiness test for G2. So I'm telling it in another session, I'm building phase G2, and I want to update the readiness test plan. I tell it where it is, and I want to add a test for things that have been being built in G2. So now I have both running. Let's go ahead and answer those questions. Now I have G2 running and the G2 readiness test running. Now, let me talk for just a minute about what to do with the readiness test. Let's say that I went through that readiness test and I found some issues. Well, what I would do is I would go through and I would mark each step that passed, and each step that didn't pass, I would put what I saw instead. Then I could give that entire readiness test back to Claude and say, hey, I found these errors. Claude would read through it and it would know exactly what to check. Again, that is not something that Claude could do on its own. It can't look at the AI and know that it's working. Yes, I know that you could tell it to try to use computer use or something like that, but you need the human input there. You need the human decisions to go in and look at what's happening, give it a sanity check, make sure that it's working. Both of my sessions need input. Now, so what I would do then is I would just continue this loop through each of my phases, the rest of G, the rest of H, the rest of I. All I would do on the phase G2 is when this is finished, I would go back and do the same review that I did for the previous phases. I would get Claude to look at what's been built for G2, compare it to the documentation, especially the decision records and the technical requirements, make sure everything is synced, make sure everything is consistent, and if it's not, get it to fix the inconsistencies with my input. At that point, then, we can go back and do the readiness test for G2. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go offline, and I'm going to complete the rest of G. I'm going to go from G1 all the way through the rest of G, step by step, just like this, until we're finished. And then when I come back in the next episode, I'll show you what the complete readiness test looks like for phase G. We can go through and do some more tests, and then we're ready to start phase H. There's only phase H and phase I left, and most of those are just hardening and polishing. So when we come back for the next episode next week, most of the application will be finished and we'll be able to do some really good testing. I hope to see you then. Thank you for joining.